welcome to In Conversation, and thank you both very much for joining me today. So it's actually Women's Equality Day, which is an American holiday, and it celebrates the anniversary of women gaining the right to vote in the United States. So as part of that, we thought it'd be a really good thing to host an In Conversation that looks at women within publishing, particularly within the industry itself, and also to get some of your perspectives on the industry and on things that maybe changed, and to get a bit of your history as well, maybe to, for anyone who's trying to get into the industry, especially women, who might have some burning questions or want to know about your particular histories. So I've still just seen Amanda's trying to join, so we'll try and link up with her in a minute. I just want to welcome everybody else out there who's tuning in again to this instalment of In Conversation. As I say, we're going to be discussing women in publishing today. If anyone has any specific questions, then please do drop them in the comments section, and then I'll get round to them and moderate them and send them to our guests when we get a chance. So yeah, it's going to be informal, so do send those questions. So first of all, I'll introduce who I have here with me today. So I've got Carrie Olivia Adams, who comes from the University of Chicago Press. Now let me get your job title right, Carrie, because it's a bit of a mouthful. You are the Marketing Communications Director. And Holly Rose is from Intellect, the company that I represent, and Holly's our Marketing Director. So both industry experts, both with a long history within the industry, both have had many roles from my knowledge. So to begin with, Carrie, tell us a little bit about what your role entails. What do you currently do, and what does a day look like for you?
Sure. So I oversee our entire promotions team, which includes all of our book publicists, as well as advertising, exhibits, marketing design. And then I also oversee internal and external communication strategy. So that includes social media, as well as sort of our own internal communication systems. I also work on our seasonal catalog process and its relationship to Edelweiss and all of the sort of metadata that goes out into the world. So it's all part of the basic marketing package that kind of goes together for a book.
Is there any particular parts of the role that you enjoy the most?
I really love the publicity aspect. I work on publicity for our highest profile trade books. And what I'm really missing at the moment are the publicity calls that I used to make in New York, and meeting one-on-one with book reviewers and podcast producers, and actually having a chance to just sit down and talk books with people. I think that's part of why many people get into publishing, is like we just like talking about books, and I really loved that part of the job, and I'm hoping that sooner or later we can get back on the road and kind of continue to foster those relationships.
Brilliant. Okay. And Holly, how about you? Tell us.
Yeah. Hello.
Hey, Amanda. Before I give Holly the floor, I'll just welcome Amanda Breccia. So executive media and Macmillan. So we have 3 experts from 3 different roles, but 3 different companies, but all women at the top. So great to have you all here today. Amanda, we were just talking about respective roles. So Holly, tell us a little bit about what you're doing.
Yeah, so I'm the marketing director at Intellect. I officially oversee the marketing team, the design team, sales, conferences, social media, book reps, distribution, journals and book partners. But as a director of a small company, I also do multiple other things: HR, IT, finance, policy, and I still do a bit of typesetting and cover design. So it's an incredibly mixed role, doing lots of many things.
And you have to manage as well. So
I have to manage James, which is a full-time job in itself.
Holly, what about you? I mean, obviously, my favourite part definitely isn't managing me, but what role do you find most rewarding?
I really enjoy the variety, just the different challenges that come with running a business. And kind of having a different challenge each day, really. That's actually something I really enjoy about my role. But actually just the design, working with the marketing team, and just the creativity and enthusiasm that comes with that team, I find really, really inspiring.
Cool. Thank you. And Amanda, tell us a little bit about your role in sales.
Sure. So I'm the executive media editor at Macmillan Learning, which is a fairly large academic educational publisher based in the US. We have about 6 offices here in the States and an international branch to the business. So I really focus on creating digital courseware and ebooks for higher education. My role in particular oversees a team that actually customizes those products for specific schools and courses based on requirements that they have that are unique to their programs. So I have responsibilities for both the kind of content management side, working with instructors and a wonderful team of project editors to bring, content through the editorial process. And then also the other side of, digitizing, adding a layer of, accessibility, creating ebooks and online courses, and then making sure it all gets into the hands of instructors in time. This is actually our first week back at school, and a lot of instructors are back on campus for the first time. So there's kind of a flurry of, that back to school excitement right now, which also comes with loads of questions and, panic emails as everyone's kind of getting set up and getting back into the swing of things. So, yeah.
Thank you. Anything that you particularly reward about that role?
I mean, I really consider my, main job to be helping students learn. So at the end of, any day or any project, knowing that, a specific resource or tool is really getting into the right hands and giving, instructors what they need to really help students perform better, I find incredibly rewarding and definitely keeps me in my job.
Well, thank you all for that. I thought it'd be interesting a little bit, like your career pathway and how you publishing and some of the roles. Because I think publishing academia is something quite mythologized, kind of almost scared to dip their toe. And one of the things I wanted to say was, sort of mythologize them. Did you be a publisher and have one of your first roles? Did you go to college and university? Or what's your pathway?
Are you directing to me?
Yes, please. Sorry.
You keep breaking up, so I wasn't sure. I didn't want to interrupt anybody. So I am a poet, and so in college I was an English major and was kind of studying comp literature, and I knew that I was never actually make a living as a poet. And so I got very lucky when I was a sophomore in college. I had never heard of a university press before, and I was actually interning at the Georgia Review at the time, quarterly literary journal, and they had an ad in the back from the University of Georgia Press. And I was like, what is this place on campus that publishes books? This is amazing. And so I sought out an internship there. So I have been working in publishing in one way or another since I was 20 years old. And it was a really great experience. Georgia is a much smaller press than Chicago. So like, staff of the press is about as large as our marketing department in comparison. But it meant that I kind of got to learn all the different pieces come together. So when I moved to Chicago, that I wanted to stay in academic writing, and of course, University of Chicago Press being the largest and one of the oldest, I immediately sort of sought it out. And I ended up getting a part job in the journal division as the editor 18 years ago, and kind of kept working my way up from there and making friends in different departments. And have played in marketing since. I realized that is when we get to have a little bit more fun sometimes, right kind of personalities, and so that's been my path. I got very lucky early on and just stuck with it.
You're a lifer like me. Yeah, we've got a few technical issues. First time we've tried 4 chat room, so hopefully it'll all work. There is definitely a bit of an echo where I haven't clue what technical is, but we'll muddle through it. And Holly, to you, what about yourself? How did you get into?
Yeah, so it's a bit of a non-traditional path, I think. I did graphic design at university, and started after graduating. Started working within design studios, and I actually applied for a design role at a magazine publisher, food magazine publisher. Didn't get that job actually, but a week later they rang me and said, actually, we've got a job in production. Do you want it? And being a graduate, yeah, of course, I'll take it. I was interning time for free for 6 months, and I was waitressing in the evenings. So a full-time role was great, and it was in publishing. So I worked in magazine production, chasing adverts, reprographics, sending things to print for 9 months, and then actually another role came up in design, so I took that. So it was a bit of a sideways thing into design, but it was actually great. That again, that was a really small business, and makes me think about offices now, because we sat on one long table. I sat opposite editorial, next to sales, and the publisher was opposite, and production was next door, and I learned an extraordinary amount about publishing, just through osmosis, just by being there. So I think that was a great start, and just being able to sideline into design. And then that took me to Intellect. I was doing editorial design there, commissioning food photography. And then the cover design or typesetting job came. It was a graphic designer at Intellect, and I thought that would be great. Yeah, I joined Intellect as the graphic designer, doing cover design, typesetting, all sorts, postcards, everything. I was the only one. So yeah, I did that for quite a few years, and then Masood, who founded Intellect, said you need to take on some people management to progress. So I took on some of the marketing team. I don't know at which point, James, I started managing you, but it was probably early on. And yeah, so kind of developed into a marketing director role. So it's quite an unusual kind of path from graphic design to marketing director. In a small company, it kind of worked.
Thank you, Holly. And Amanda, what about yourself? What was your trajectory pathway to the role that you've currently got?
Yeah, so I think similarly, I started out as an undergrad English major. I didn't quite fancy myself a writer, but I knew that I enjoyed reading, and enjoyed that community. I had a work study job in the English department, and so I got to spend a lot of time with not just the professors I had as an undergrad, but a lot of instructors, and really saw a different side of what their roles were in terms of how much actually went into teaching, which gave me like a real respect for that position. And towards my junior year, I started working on a lit magazine, and that was kind of my first introduction into publishing or working in an editorial role, which I really loved. I mean, it was such a unique experience to have at that point. And then I went to a conference called AWP. I don't know if anyone's familiar with that. Association, I might get this acronym wrong, Association for Writers and Publishers?
Associated Writing Programs.
Writing programs, that's it. And so as part of that, I got a scholarship and went as part of a team of people from our English department. I got to actually walk around an exhibit hall and talk to publishers and people working in the publishing industry. And that was probably the first time I'd actually been exposed to this community of people. And I just left feeling like this is my group of people. I think I found my home. So after graduating, I moved from New Jersey to New York after a year of working and saving up some money, and really hit the pavement, literally like walking from publisher to publisher, dropping off my resume, like the sweet 22-year-old that I was. And eventually I got a break working in a company called Springer Nature, which is a kind of a STEM publisher, focusing on journals and monographs. And that was a great introduction to publishing. It definitely taught me a lot about, the editorial process, about managing journals, about acquisitions. I supported two managing editors whose, main focus was acquisition. So I was there for, I think, 2 years. And then I moved on to a role at Fairchild Books, which is where I spent basically the next 10 years. So I know you all are probably familiar with Fairchild. They focus on fashion and design publishing. So I sort of moved up through the ranks there, working as an assistant editor, and then eventually moving up to a senior acquisitions editor role. So by the time I left there in 2017, I was responsible for, a fashion list that was pretty well regarded and profitable, managing a team there, and working with some really wonderful authors and schools on great textbooks for fashion programs. I decided to leave the industry and go work in interior design for a year, and realized it just wasn't it wasn't a satisfying career path, and decided to come back to educational publishing, and joined Macmillan Learning about 3 years ago. So a little bit of a meandering path, but I feel like I found my way back home in the end.
Thanks, Amanda. It's just to hear that you... Carrie, didn't you leave well as well? Or
I try not to think about it. I did. I stayed in publishing because I do run a publishing company on the side called Black Ocean, but I did leave the press for a little over a year, about 4 years ago, which it was in the wake of the Trump election, when I think I was reevaluating my life and kind of wanted to do something more activist, and went to work for a nonprofit for a year. But I completely missed the culture of publishing and had to come right back. But yeah, so I blame it on Trump. I never would have made that decision without that election.
Thank you. It's interesting to hear that themselves have come out of publishing and come back in, probably with additional well, which kind of leads me into another questions. Well, first of all, just in general, especially with women in mind, I feel three of you feel that publishing is for young, where there's a lot of potential to move ranks, but it seems like people start kind of at the bottom and work your way up to the top and have many different positions. Do you think publishing is like a good opportunity for people looking to start and develop their career? I'll throw that to Holly.
Yeah, I think so. I was kind of thinking about women in publishing and why it's so women focused, and I think it's back to school and back university, where English and the humanities is so female heavy. I was looking at 70% of English degrees as female, communication and journalism's like 65%. So I think it is a natural career path for women, just because, well, within our subject areas at Intellect, the humanities publishing, it is a natural progression from those subjects that they focus on. And yeah, I'd hope in my experience in the last 20 years, I think definitely in book publishing, I think it's more female dominant, and I hope that we've now got the support to women. The gender pay gap is closed within, well, especially with Intellect, that women can progress really comfortably now, especially with a little bit more flexibility for maybe working mums, that I hope will actually get better post-COVID. I hope that that women's flexibility within the work increase, and so I think it can encourage women to keep going to the top. I think maybe traditionally men are still at the top, right at the top, or but I think we're working towards females who start at the bottom to progress. I know definitely we've got senior female staff, and I just hope that they can get right at the top, and across society, well, here in the government, in huge banks, it's still very male dominated, and I hope publishing's a little bit will be a little bit forerunner in changing some.
Yeah.
Yeah. Changing.
Sorry, Carrie, over to you.
No, I would say I do think it's changing. I think we are kind of faced with this chronological issue where, like, especially at a university press where people stay in their jobs for a long time, the men who are in leadership are there, who were hired for, many, I think a couple generations ago, and we're kind of just waiting for that kind of wave to pass over. And I think that we are, in general, women are working their way up much closer. I think we've also had the problem where men have generally gravitated towards acquisitions, and women have gravitated toward marketing a little bit. the path towards like director, at least in the university press world, has often come out of acquisitions. A lot of the smaller presses, the directors actually have an acquisitions remit. So I think that that has also skewed sort of the gender leadership in publishers, but I think that's changing.
That's really great. I was actually reading today that traditionally, and talking prior to us, that it was mainly editorial roles from college education, and women with an equal education ended up being or sales related roles. And I mean, to my mind, it seems to be. And I've seen that at Chicago. I've definitely seen that at Intellect. And I'll bring Amanda in to discuss her views on that as well. But that is a really interesting point, and that this shift is happening. People retire.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's to and ensure that we real change in all the equality and inclusivity. Amanda, what do you have anything to add on that?
I mean, yeah, I definitely think there's certainly opportunities for young women to come into publishing and work their way up. But I would also say I think it's also an industry that needs people from diverse backgrounds. So I think it's important for people who not just are maybe starting out their career, but people who are maybe progressing in their career and feeling like there's might be another industry that's better suited for them, to not feel like, oh, I have to start at the bottom again, or I don't have a skill set that will translate to this industry. Because I think it is an industry that needs critical thinkers. It needs certainly women who are interested in progressing knowledge and, feel a commitment to, servicing academic and educational communities. And I think there's such a broad range of skill sets that translate really well to publishing, that I would just, I would really encourage any women or anyone really that's maybe not just starting out to look at publishing, and not just editorial roles. I mean, we've got a great representation here of folks in marketing, in design. So I think there, at least in my experience, there tends to be sort of one way of thinking around.
Ooh, you've cut out, Amanda.
Sorry, had a call coming in. That are a little bit more, editorially focused. And I think there's such a great range of roles to be had. I just had a great hire come in from more of a technology background, someone that worked in, technology and like library sciences, and had a not, to be fair, a kind of non-traditional background, maybe something that didn't look quite like, the editorial assistant that we would typically hire. And I think more and more, publishers are realizing the value of having different backgrounds and experiences and bringing those into the culture.
Thank you. Thanks, guys. One of Intellect's directors, Yao, she's given me a few points that she wanted me to raise. She's one of fellow female directors, and we tend to recruit at entry level. Myself and Holly both started at Intellect, and we May herself, who's one of the main directors, started as interns. So it really is here. But she has some frustrations when it comes to recruitment. Especially in production, we're getting entry-level positions. We're trying to recruit entry-level positions. We very rarely get many men, or certainly not men with enough experience to publish a role. And she wonders, is that part of like the zeitgeist, part of the broader patient society, that men aren't willing to come in at lower level positions, because she's some statistics that show, predominantly in these higher management positions. And do you think that's something that more relevant to publishing, that men are less willing to come in, and do you think that's to do with education, as Holly you were kind of saying earlier on?
Yeah, I think it comes back to the education. I think it's probably the ratio of men on especially Intellect, the humanities courses, the ratio of men to women probably then applying for the roles post postgraduate. In terms of where they're coming in, I think men sometimes are a little bit more confident. I feel that kind of within society they may be willing to go for higher positioned roles, maybe not reflected in their skill set, but maybe based on confidence or kind of previous self-belief that maybe, you know, they feel they can go for those slightly higher roles that maybe women do feel, you know, traditionally that they should, you know, make sure that they can do, and you have confidence to go for. But I feel that the actual application process is for us mainly down to the number of women ratio to men in actual positions, and that comes back to school. How do you get men into English classes? How do you get into humanities, communication, performing arts, visual arts? So I think publishing can definitely look at it and make sure it's recruiting diversity. But I think it maybe traditionally stems back to schools and how people know about publishing as an actual career. I know we work with schools in our local area and try and teach them more about publishing. We get them into Intellect and tell them about the different roles. But perhaps, you know, it's that kind of early education on careers within the arts and humanities that be really boosted to help our industry kind of in the long term.
Would you jump in on that one too?
Sorry, you broke up a little. Was that directed to me?
Sorry, Carrie or Amanda, do you have to add on that idea of difficulty?
I definitely think Holly's right that there needs to be like more. I definitely wonder how many people even think of publishing as a career in college, and that we're not necessarily doing a good job of visibility and recruitment at that level. And I think that is something we struggle with kind of across this, whether it's a gender imbalance or just the you know, the general diversity problems that publishing faces overall. We're just not really kind of presenting it to a career sort of as a career choice widely. I also feel like we struggle, you know, I'm hiring for 2 entry-level positions right now, and it's just trying to actually figure out how to reach people and even let them know that these positions are out there and available. It's been interesting where we've been pushing out a lot more of our job postings over social media platforms, and that has been driving a lot more of the applicants we've received over the sort of traditional places where HR post the jobs. And I think some of this, we're still just trying to figure out how to be visible to the variety of communities we keep working in the office.
That's a very good point. Maybe we're going to start TikTok to send, you know, recruitment campaigns over the next year. Amanda, do you have anything else to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think recruiting practices are challenging in this industry. I've had similar experiences of, you know, feeling like the pool of candidates, you know, wonderful as qualified as they may be, starts to feel a little homogenous after a while. And there's certainly nothing wrong with hiring qualified candidates, but it would be nice to feel as though the pool of candidates are really representative of the communities you're serving, of the, you know, the students and instructors, and also, you know, the broader makeup of you know, our market. So it's something I feel my company's been working on really strategically, because honestly, there is no simple answer. But we've been working on some externships, which are a little bit different from an internship in that it's a shorter paid project-based experience. So they only last about 3 weeks, and it is targeting undergraduates, but really targeting undergraduates that whose backgrounds are really underrepresented in publishing, and really focusing on giving them project-based work and kind of a sponsorship coaching experience, so that it's not like such a commitment. I mean, I feel like a lot of undergraduates feel like, you know, choosing an internship is, you know, it's like the first step down like the rest of their lives, right? So they're so careful about it, which is fine. But this kind of gives anyone interested in publishing an opportunity to kind of dip their toe in. And the projects are really diverse. So there's projects that focus on technology and on like software development. There's projects that focus on editorial, marketing, sales. So it's, hopefully doing it in kind of a more targeted, kind of topical way, and then pushing that out to really programs that aren't just liberal arts focused, right? So trying to expand that reach into other undergraduate programs where, frankly, the students may not have even considered this type of work. So it's really just getting off the ground. And of course, if any listeners are interested, we can share out some info. But I think that's maybe one interesting way to try to broaden exposure to the industry. Because I really do think like internships and like undergraduate experience is definitely a real entry point. And, and also just tapping into, I think, the community of educators that we have access to. So I always think about, the fact that we work with, at my institution, almost every English program in the United States. And so we should have really good access to the people who are in the best places to, educate their students and their communities about career opportunities. So I think those are two specific ways we can help improve that, pool of candidates and create a more diverse experience.
Yeah, I think paid internships, I mean, we've been doing that for a while now, is essential as well. Like, otherwise you do get wealthy women coming into, traditionally wealthy white women, coming in who can be supported and, by not working or relocating for internships. And that should be a thing of the past. We should, actually COVID, I think it being virtual internships as well has really helped. You don't have to be in a location, here. You don't have to be in London. You don't have a connection in London. You can't afford to be in London we're Southwest based, but I'm thinking more general for publishing in UK. So I think that will really widen, hopefully, the diversity of women and men to the industry.
Yeah, Chicago actually is one of the university presses that participates in the Mellon Diversity Fellowship. We've been doing that for 3 years now. It's been wonderful. It brings in underrepresented people in publishing in for a full year of paid work in the academic department. So they get a really kind of close look at what kind of goes on. They kind of do the editorial role for a year. And I think that kind of providing that level of paid experience is really important and opens up the field.
Yeah, I think they're all very important points. And you know what, you've started to answer a bunch of my questions, so I'm glad you're taking this direction. I mean, I was just going to say earlier on, like, publishing tradition, I'm coming from the UK, but, also a transatlantic perspective, so I can only speak to that. And Holly obviously is based in the UK. Carrie and Amanda, you're over here. So there's going to be slightly different things, but, when I started, it was definitely quite very class-based, because again, you probably needed to learn or some extra masters specifically, or a master's degree in English transferable. It necessitated a lot of time and a lot of money, and therefore potentially also or guardian thing. So I feel like that's changing, and we're making steps and taking steps to change. But it's also interesting when we talked about things going virtual, because I think publishing, it was very geographically positioned industry. Well, obviously Amanda and I are in New York, but like I was in Bristol, but Bristol again was a cultural capital and always has been, with a wealth of culture industry. Carrie, Chicago, is one of the other big cities. So these three were spawned out locations, and in the UK, places like Oxford and Cambridge, there's always going to be a lot of different publishers. I know you've done your tour, but do you guys think, truthfully, in light of COVID, that those things are technology and a change of mindset to enable diversity, inclusivity, quality in general?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great point about the industry historically being very location based, and those locations are expensive cities. And if you can't afford to live in an expensive city, it's basically the message you're getting is if you can't afford to live in an expensive city or, you know, commute potentially 45 minutes to an hour and a half, and make that, you know, sacrifice on your lifestyle, then maybe this isn't the industry for you. And I really don't think that's the message we want to continue to send to people looking to get into this field. Working remotely for the past year, I think has taught all of us that we're capable. This is a highly collaborative industry, and I think it's filled with great communicators and people who really work well in teams. And I think if you can come to the table with that skill set, you should have an opportunity to work remotely. I absolutely believe there's value in in-person meetings, and you know, I hope that there's a way for that to continue even with remote hires. But it seems to me that personally, I feel the value of in-person communication doesn't outweigh what you lose by limiting your potential pool of candidates and employees to people who live, you know, in or around major cities. It's too limiting.
Completely agree. And for working mums, I think the, you know, technology now and the flexibility that maybe remote can, you know, the balance of remote and office could give working mums, it means they don't have to leave the industry, that, you know, they don't have to commute into London or into Bristol and do a 9 to 5 in the office. That, you know, they could do remote 9 till 3 and manage to pick up the kids and do those things. So I hope that, you know, women will continue to stay within the industry once they, you know, have children or have family or even dependents, you know, within, you know, women become carers of parents as well quite often. So, you know, if you've got any caring dependents, that women don't have to be extracted from the industry as soon as, you know, some of those responsibilities come. So I hope that the technology can really help with that as well.
Yeah, I think we're definitely seeing a lot of upsides coming out of this, as far as definitely the flexibility piece and the opportunity to have a diverse candidate pool. Just as a manager and as someone who has benefited in the past from having, you know, close mentorships and advocates within the publishing house itself, I just wonder, and I'm very concerned with how to replicate that when we start to have people working remotely full time, because I think especially, you know, for women, I benefited from having a fantastic marketing director who was a woman and a great role model, and having that sort of in-person mentorship really meant a lot to me. And I think also just the opportunities to get to know my colleagues in other departments, especially at a really big project, and kind of have actually that kind of FaceTime at the table made a difference in my career. And I worry about younger people coming in and missing out on those opportunities, and kind of how do we take the good part of all of the sort of flexibility and the diversity and kind of find a way to kind of build in the sort of community structure we got in person. I just don't want to lose that, and I want the generation to miss out on that.
Right. Yeah, I think that's a good point, Carrie. I'm actually do you guys got any tactics or anything that you're trying to employ to try to create that level of communication at first, or should I actually more simply, are you in the office anytime soon? How's the work practice taking place over there in Chicago?
Yeah, we were originally supposed to start going back to the office in September, and that has now been pushed off indefinitely. And we're still struggling with what that is going to look like, whether that is us in the office for 3 days a week, an agreed upon set of 3 days, and that kind of thing. I think that was originally what we had proposed as the plan, and but I think there's been a lot of resistance to that because people don't want to give up the levels of flexibility. And so I think we're still trying to figure out what that balance looks like. But right now, with everything going on, we just kind of keep pushing it out. So we're heavily reliant on sort of a lot of, you know, Microsoft Teams and sort of ways that you can kind of easily chat, create some sense of community from afar. But I think if we're going to stay this way, there are a lot more of sort of innovation that we need to think of, whether that's sort of pairing up people in sort of more direct one-on-one mentorship so that they have somebody that's always kind of their contact, you know. Or cross-departmental relationships so that people are kind of getting to know other people outside of their immediate workday. I think there's still a lot to be thought through. So I'm kind of curious where it goes.
Holly and Amanda, would you guys like to offer a bit of information about your return plans or how you're trying to communicate with colleagues? Maybe you first.
Yeah, so we were going to go back for core days but again, we didn't feel it maybe worked for part-time staff, and people have got used to it working around their life. So we thought having the core days would actually sometimes limit again. So we've gone for a fully flexible policy, encouraging people to be in the office for meetings, meeting colleagues, that creative brainstorming that you kind of feel that we slightly miss virtually. And again, I totally agree on the osmosis, that learning experience that you just get through listening to a senior colleague on the phone, listening to someone deal with a difficult situation. Things that I really appreciated in that first role of mine, where I learned about sales, trying to sell his adverts, and and how some of those conversations are being missed, and some of that natural osmosis is being missed. Carrie, I totally agree. It's a huge challenge. And it will be really interesting to see how different companies approach that. I don't know the answer right now, but I just think in terms of I think we need to talk to newer staff, talk about training, make them really inquisitive, make them ask questions, and really kind of make sure that they're trying to get as much of that learner's experience as possible. But it's a really tricky challenge, I think.
Yeah, I definitely agree. We're expecting to go back to the office part-time in October, 1 or 2 days a week, mainly to have team meetings and have an opportunity to have that kind of in-person conversation and brainstorming. So I'm looking forward really to seeing my colleagues again and returning to that, hopefully as long as we're able to. I agree that it has been kind of a challenge with, especially with new hires, I've found, because they don't have that sort of cultural context to kind of come in and know who these people are in different departments and have a sense of, what the overall vibe is at the company. So I do think, there's definitely been a lot more programming going on at my company to try to build more connections and, keep employees engaged and, kind of keep the culture alive and thriving. So we've had a lot of really cool speaker series, not really webinars, but sort of open discussions that are kind of cross-departmental. We have a lot of working groups that are cross-functional and include people from different departments. And we also do a career week, which I thought was really great. It was back in May, where different departments and leaders kind of talked about their roles, and different people from different departments, were involved. So as a one-time event, that was really great, but I almost feel like the essence of that kind of needs to exist all the time rather than in just a given week. So I don't know that we've figured out the perfect way to do that yet, but I know it's definitely something we're all kind of striving for, and realize there's so much value in learning from your colleagues. And I think, like you said, especially people who work in different departments and have different day-to-day experiences and different ways of thinking. I think there's a lot of innovation that can happen when you have those conversations. So yeah, I don't know the answer either, but I think there's some good ideas. We can all float back and forth.
Oh, well, thank you guys. That's very interesting to hear your perspective. Just wanted to open up to our audience again. Thanks everyone for joining us. If anyone has specific questions for our panel, drop them in the comments and I'll try and get around to them. It's always good to have all your questions as well. But I wanted to ask something a bit more general, because I always get asked this question, and it's often either young women scholars or potentially young women in the industry. More often than I think it goes back to but it's where is the industry going? Is public how how is technology and things that have happened for years affecting the industry? So I know that's a huge question, but in a nutshell, what are your thoughts on publishing and its future? And are there anything you would highlight in terms of what the future holds for us as an industry? Does anyone want to do that first?
Monster, James. Monster question.
Yeah. That's it. Well, go on.
Where's the industry going?
What's the future holds for publishing, or maybe we could put that in a different way. What are the big things about publishing, and what do you see? Technology, access, things of that.
It's such a big question, but yeah, I think that
Sorry.
no, it's interesting to think that. We've been really pleased with how we've come out of the pandemic, and I think all publishers have. I think one thing that's been really reassuring is after all of these years, people talking about the death of the book and everything else, we realized that in the worst of times, people definitely want to read books, and we've definitely seen that there's still this desire for what we're producing. It's been really nice to know that we still have an audience and we still have a readership. For us, I think the most interesting thing was that people came to us directly to buy books during this whole time. Like we just relaunched our website, which has been fantastic, and we're hoping that kind of continues. But even older website, a lot of the traffic during the worst of the pandemic was coming directly to us to buy books, and I think we're going to continue to be. We're really pushing on that from a sort of direct to consumer sales standpoint, and investing a lot more in sort of email outreach to our existing customers and building more lists to kind of drive people directly to us, and that has been fantastic. And we've also we just had an ebook sale, and really building off of making our books just as easily available and accessible everywhere. Like for us, it's been really pivoting to POD, to on demand, every possible location we can in the world, to make sure that there are books and that we can get things into people's hands. So I don't have any grand visions of where we're going, but I feel like it's nice to know that we're still wanted, and that our focus is really on just making it as accessible as possible.
Great. Yeah, I think that to me, that things are now. Everything's just content. It's credibility to content, and people are. On one hand, people are buying books and taking them to the beach. That's not died. But on the other hand, it's all about platforms and access to content wherever you may be, then being able to tailor-made. I think we're all working on that. I might bring in Amanda here because I know one of the specialized.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. I think probably one of the main differences in the way I think about the industry now versus when I started is I think of it more as content publishing than physical book publishing, because at this point it's really just an output. It's the content itself is malleable, and it can be delivered in many different ways. I'm a hardcore romantic, and so I love a physical book, and I always will. I love a beautifully designed book, and I'll touch paper and appreciate the quality of it all day. So that's not to devalue that component of it at all, but at least in the field that I work in, it's really the shift is focused more towards content and technology as a way to support education. So we really do envision ourselves as content publishers, as educational technologists, and that's really a different mode of thinking, I think, than when I came into publishing. And it was a very linear path from manuscript to bound book. So I think in some ways it's really freeing. It gives us a lot more opportunities to meet our customers where they are, to fill different needs that educators may have and students may have, and especially in education and in the role that I play. One thing that I really like about it is that you can respond so quickly to changes in the market and changes in the world. Nobody anticipated COVID happening, and within a matter of a couple of weeks, we had instructors who and students who left campus to go on spring break, basically never to return, or not to return for another 18 months. And so working with all of those customers and all of those students to figure out how to like quickly translate everything they had been doing into an online environment, we were well placed to do it because, you know, that's we do technology well. But I think it kind of opened everyone's eyes in the sense of like, what we're really talking about is content, and what we're really talking about is needing access to it and like needing it tomorrow. So that's one way I think it's changed a lot. And I think it will continue to change, especially in educational publishing, where a lot of teachers were kind of forced to adopt technology. And I'm not saying everyone's going to come out of it loving it and sticking with it, but I think everyone realized the value and realized that there's actually a lot of benefits to different ways of teaching and learning that, you know, you can explore through maybe a non-traditional format. So yeah.
It's interesting. We heard 10 years ago that the ebook would be a nail in the coffin of the printed book, and that didn't happen at all. With library sales, which is again something that Holly and I talk about from a journal publishing perspective, you know, we thought that, you know, print sales, if for books, are going to be no more, and it's going to be interesting over the coming years whether we return when the libraries go completely digital in line with the way that they're transforming their physical as well, or whether we do see a return to printed books. But again, like Amanda said, I think there's always going to be a place for high-end, you know, design products that represent, you know, a difference between a piece of art. Whether if something's on CD, Spotify or Apple or whatever, you know, thing. And I think books do have. Anyway, I'm rambling. Holly,
Yeah, I was thinking about the industry. I mean, I was thinking about the challenges as well. I think from a woman's point of view, maybe a UK perspective as well, I worry about the kind of funding grants going into the arts and humanities. I do slightly worry about APCs, open access, and diversity within publishing. I worry that, you know, maybe with APCs, women plus developing countries or, you know, other economic regions may struggle to publish within books and journals. So in terms of open access, I feel that's a challenge for maybe. I know women submit less to journals. I know especially within the sciences, there's a 25% submission rate from women, where the 60% kind of male-female ratio actually within roles. So I think as a challenge, we need to make sure, like we do in recruitment, that submissions and book proposals are coming from women and also coming from diverse voices, to make sure that the content we're publishing is representative of the world and, you know, as well. But yeah, just from my perspective, a challenge is, yeah, the UK government wants to cut all the funding to arts and humanity degree courses, and they don't feel they're as important as a Conservative government, I'll point out. But they don't feel they're as important as the STEM sciences. So as a challenge for the industry, I think within it's particularly Intellect, is to make sure that that funding's there, that you know, our ethos is to support niche voices and just to make sure that those voices are coming through, and that the subjects, maybe without huge readership, or, you know, that we're representing them and they're being heard. It's going to be a continued challenge over the next couple of years.
It's that's a really important point, and it's quite interesting because when I was doing some Googling around and reading a few journal articles, one of the things that kept coming up when I was typing in women in publishing as a basic search was actually referring to women and who are publishing women in the industry. And yeah, the stats about, especially in STEM subjects, the disparity of women's journals versus men, it astounded me. I mean, I think at Intellect, with all of our here that we work for, we're in a little bit of I guess it's a bit we are, because we see more women in subjects work in as a generalisation going on in academia. I think that's a really important point too. Does anyone have any more comments before we move on?
I just had a quick comment about that. I think that's a great point. I think with any academic discipline, to some degree, representation starts with the content. And so I feel like that's also where, as publishers, we have an obligation and a responsibility to make sure that the content we publish is representative. I think I'm coming from a slightly different perspective because textbooks, we kind of get to pick and choose, right? Like we're not at the will of like submissions and what's incoming, but we published our great economics textbook, core textbook last year by Betsy Stevenson, who's one of the most well-known, female economists. She worked for Barack Obama. She's amazing. And as part of her process of putting together this textbook, she did an audit of like all economics, 101 textbooks out there and how women are represented in them, whether it's through images, through examples, through like the case studies in them. And it was like her findings were shocking, and that like they were very underrepresented, and also the way they were represented was not necessarily in a positive or equal light. So, one objective that she had in going into writing this textbook was to, course correct that, so that, an undergraduate coming into a economics 101 class isn't having, this subconscious message that women don't belong in economics, right? Like we want to make sure that we're supporting young women in all fields, whether it's STEM or, economics or whatever it might be. So I think that's one kind of critical way that publishers can play a role in kind of the whole life cycle of academics, right? Because it all starts, it all starts somewhere, whether it's, your high school textbook or, the education you're getting there, or, the materials or, just what you're seeing reflected back to you. So being mindful of that and us all feeling invested in it, I think is ultimately going to, really elevate women, across the board in academics and give us, ultimately great submissions from, more women and more scholarship coming from women across disciplines.
Excellent. We're about to come up to our hour, but if you guys have got another 10 minutes, I'd love to ask you a couple more questions as well. Well, thanks for that. And again, if anyone has questions, try and get to it. But you got still good for a minute? Great. So I wanted to ask something a bit more practical. So you've all got a wealth of experience. So I wanted what advice for women looking to get into the industry, especially the things with. So if someone's what's your top? Any advice you give? I'll throw that to.
Who was that? Sorry, you cut out.
Sorry, am I cutting out? I can hear you guys well. Sorry. So
no, I can hear all the others.
Can you hear?
Amanda's stealing your Wi-Fi.
Well, I was just going to say, have any advice for women specifically trying the industry? And if Holly can hear me, I'll Holly first.
Okay. Yeah, so I think enter it. I think it's just about confidence and, apply and, be honest and be yourself and be passionate. And I think from my perspective, be willing to maybe go for a role that isn't your idealistic, I went into a production role and sidelined and, just if you've got a passion for a certain industry or a company with a certain ethos, just go for it and be honest and open with the interviewer and with the company, and just kind of even I think a bit of, say your flaws, ask when you don't know what the lingo is. I still ask the accountant regularly what he is talking about and what words he's using. And I think there's a quite nice about honesty. And I remember saying at my interview, I didn't know how InDesign worked till I was a Quark girl back in the days, which is an old typesetting tool. And I sat on my lap with an InDesign manual. So I think there's just a honesty and openness. If you've got that passion and you've got the skills, just kind of go for it, and don't worry about the 5-year plan. I know a lot of female working mums think, oh, in 5 years I might start a family, I might want a bit of flexibility, I'm not going to go for it. But as they say, I would encourage everyone to kind of lean in and go for it and worry about what you want to do in 5 years and the flexibility you might need family you might have, then don't hesitate in doing what you want to do, as the moment arises. Those promotions, don't worry about, what will happen in a few years. Go for it, and that will follow, I think.
I think that's exactly right, Holly. I think that you're like, it doesn't have to be exactly the job you were looking for. Like, I think, it really, all you're trying to do is get your foot in the door. And I think go for something that, even if it's not a perfect match, it's not the dream job, it's still like you're gonna get someone through that interview process who can take you along in a different direction, or you get that job and then you turn it into what you want and find the people that you need. Like, the nice thing about publishing is I do feel like a community that's self. So once you do get your foot in the door somewhere, you can kind of move within the process and move within publishers, as suits what you're looking for and your skill set at the time. My one word of advice to everybody, especially someone who's like preparing for a bunch of things right now, is invest a lot of time in your cover letter. That is like one of the number one things I look at. Like, your resume can be strong, but I want to know that you are passionate about this job and that you know the press and you know the books that we publish. Like, kind of take your time to do a little bit of research and kind of put that into a letter. And that sort of honesty and that sort of compassion really comes through. And so that's, in the end, what I'm really looking for is somebody who cares about the industry and cares about books.
I think that's a good point there, of knowing the press and doing your diligence, having read some of the journal books. I think that's just good advice for go for a job. Amanda?
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with Carrie. I've had experiences of having wrong companies and cover letters and, things that it's just an automatic no if, that's present. So it sometimes feels really unfortunate because I've looked at resumes first and then cover letters second and thought, too bad, So definitely, yes, be mindful. I would also say, like, be authentic. I've had great conversations with candidates where I've surfaced so many things about their background that they didn't put on their resume because they didn't think they were valuable or important. Like having, experience waiting tables. Like I actually think that shows that you have great people skills and that you have probably really good soft skills that are, especially if you're just entering the workforce and have limited experience. I would encourage anyone to, consider like the full scope of their background and bring all of that to the table, and don't feel like putting something might, give the wrong impression. Like you just come to the table with your full self and be authentic and passionate about the position. I think that usually comes through, and usually hiring managers are really looking for, I would say at an entry level, you're looking for soft skills. Like, you're looking for someone who's a critical thinker. You're looking for someone who shows that they can work well with a team. So, be thoughtful and strategic, of course, in how you put together your resume, but don't leave things off that will demonstrate skills that are just as important as, the harder skills.
Thank you, guys. Really good points. Just another thing that's slightly that is I was speaking to earlier, and she highlighted the newsletter, a really good resource for women in publishing. And I'm also aware of it's called womeninpublishing.org. It's being a really good resource as well for women in the industry, so academic support network, information sharing, all that kind of stuff. It doesn't have to be strictly. Would you have? Are there any sources regularly go to? Maybe people trying to get free or want to find out a bit more about publishing or the issues. Are there any websites, organizations that you would?
If you're local to Chicago, there is a Chicago Women in Publishing organization that does run. Back in the day when we were all meeting in person, they had actual seminars with speakers. They're doing some of that online, and there's kind of a job list and some resources. A good way to see other women and see the sort of the Chicagoland publishing community. I also think that the University Press's website is really useful. They have it's definitely a great job list, and you can kind of get some sort of insight into just classes and their disciplinary focus and just sort of what the university press publishing world looks like at the moment.
Thanks, Carrie. Holly, anything?
Yeah, I'm just searching my email. I get a really good newsletter, and they interview different women in publishing, and I can't. It's just crossed. It's just gone. But I will try and dig it out, James, and hopefully you could share it afterwards.
No worries. What we'll do for anyone listening is we'll type notes for this video, which we posted on Intellect's Instagram page on our Instagram TV channel, so for posterity. So we'll type in some notes for things.
Yeah, no, it starts with the, which isn't great in the search engine of my.
Amanda, anything that you use?
The only thing that's coming to mind is Publishers Marketplace. I just recall that always being a good source for publishing jobs. I really find that LinkedIn is a great resource for job search, especially if you're, active in like building a network there and, keeping in touch with folks that you might have met. I have to say that I've had like some really interesting interviews and leads come out of like just random meetings with people. So I almost feel like putting yourself in places where you would meet people in the industry is one good piece of advice. Like, for example, when I went to that AWP conference, I gobbled up, business cards, and granted this was pre-LinkedIn, but had I had LinkedIn today, I probably would have went back online and like connected with all those people. So, networks are something that you have to kind of build very intentionally. So I would say, go to events, find communities online, find spaces where you can connect with people. And that would be my best suggestion. Try to find the people who you might want to work with or for, and stalk them a little bit.
Good advice. It's always good advice for academics. So I guess we take it ourselves. Any Holly?
Sorry?
Any luck finding you at the? That's cool. No worries. We can come back to it. Well, we're about out of time, but I did want to give you guys an opportunity to one, ask each other any questions, and number two, highlight anything that's going on at the press, maybe in regard to diversity, that programs or anything you might want to highlight, or anything that's going on respectively.
Yeah, I can. I think something that is done recently was really important is to introduce a new menopause policy as well, which we talked about early year careers, but I think again, in terms of supporting women throughout their careers, I think that's a really important move. I know the UK government are looking at that as well, so I think we should also make sure that all through women's lives and careers, we're probably all going to be working till we're about 75 now. It'd be good to just make sure the industry and all industries are supporting kind of women throughout. I think that's really important that companies are looking at mental health and menopause, obviously maternity leave, all through careers. So I think that's something we should press to boards and directors that are really important.
Yeah, great points. Thanks, Holly. Carrie, Amanda?
All I would say is that keep an eye out early, and next year is when we'll start doing applications again for the next Mellon Fellowship, which is really a fantastic opportunity. I think we usually start taking applications in January or February of each year. So definitely look out for that.
I just say for Intellect as well, we offer a number of paid internships, as Holly said earlier. So do keep a look out for media. Sign up to our newsletter and just take a look at our website as well, and do the same for Macmillan and for UCP.
Just to say, my colleague Marika, thank you. It's called The Flip, the newsletter. She's put it in the comments. So yeah, The Flip is just a regular newsletter reviews, which always has salaries in there as well, which I think we should be more transparent about. But so that's really interesting. Thanks, Marika.
Amanda, anything from you?
I think the Macmillan Learning Externship, I'd be happy to share information about that. I think that's a great opportunity. If there are educators out there who think it'd be of interest to their students, please pass it along. We also do internships, I believe 2 or 3 times a year. I believe we've all hired up for fall, but for spring, we'll be looking out for new interns. And then we also offer summer internships at Macmillan Learning. So be happy to share resources around those opportunities.
Thank you. Well, I guess that leaves me to say thank you all so much. And I think it's really important to give people, as the saying goes. And I just want to say congratulations to all three of you, because you do amazing. I know all three of you very well, and I just want to say congratulations to your colleagues who agree with me as well, that you're leaders, all these other things. So thanks for all you do. Thank you so much for joining us today. It's really been it's also been to have 4 screens. So anyone listening, thank you also for joining today, and we'll be back again next week. This will be recorded live, available on Instagram feed. Feel free to share it. It'll be on our Instagram TV there. So do take a look at this, and of course all the other presentations which we've been running since the pandemic started. A silver lining there, anyway. Well, guys, thank you so much again, and I hope to see you in person again soon. Amanda, on later.
Thanks, Jeff.
Lovely to meet you all.
Good to talk to you all.
And you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys. Cheers.
Bye.
Bye.